Kia ora. So, a return to the series Early's Late ND Reviews. Okay, and sometimes I explain why it is called this at the start of the video, and sometimes I don't. Now today I'm not going to, because I just want to launch into the topic because I'm quite excited about this one. But check out my other videos and all will be explained, and that will also explain why I always have the camera the wrong way around and why it's often shaky. All these things are for a reason. So, biggest thing to say is there'll be spoilers from the start because, as I have said in other videos, when I watch reviews, I tend to watch them after I've seen something. I love that. You know, it's part of the enjoyment of something for me is to see what other people think of it and to see if they've kind of picked up any, interesting little nuggets or nuances that, that went over the top of my head, because lots of things go over the top of my head these days, which is one of the things that, one of the reasons why it's called ND Reviews. So, the series I want to talk about is the Exorcist TV series, and I want to talk about the first season, because that's all I've watched. I haven't watched the second season. I'm savouring that, because I really loved the first season. Now, this is a sequel to The Exorcist, but it picks up the story sometime later. Now, I don't know where the sequel films fit in. I have seen at least one of them, probably two of them, but not for some time. So all memory has kind of gone out of my head. I remember one was about nursing, or featured a nursing home, and had the kind of had these kind of things for cutting off people's heads in it. I'm not sure if that was the 2 or 3. And I know 1 is supposed to be really good. So I'll have to check that one out. There's a channel that I follow, which I'll give a shout out to, which is Grumpy Andrew's. I can't remember the full title, but it's a horror review channel. And Grumpy Andrews, he's not really that grumpy. He's a nice guy, really. Very perceptive, very eloquent. Has some very interesting things to say about horror, and he loves horror. So check him out. But I know he talks about either 2 or 3 being really good. So a bit of work for me to catch up on. But the TV series, okay, so I mean, The Exorcist is a hard act to follow, obviously. I'm talking about the first film, The Exorcist. And this is, obviously, the TV series is nowhere near as scary, shocking, disturbing, terrifying as The Exorcist, because for me, The Exorcist is still one of the scariest films ever made. I might give a shout out as well to Rob Agar, who does another YouTube channel which is called Collative. I think it's called Collative Learning, and he does some really good film analysis, and he's done some brilliant analysis of The Exorcist, and he's drawn parallels between that and childhood sexual abuse, as in Regan being sexually abused, as a kind of a subplot. And when he pointed that out, that just made total sense to me. That's the field I work in. So there were lots of allegories to that in there, and lots of kind of similarities with that kind of situation. So it's not to say, as some very stupid people on a forum where I was discussing it in the comments actually under his video, that seemed to think that when I agreed with his comment, that I was kind of saying that none of it was supernatural and it was all to do with sexual abuse, and sexual abuse looks like possession, which is not what I said at all. But what he said, which was a very nuanced point, and unfortunately some of his viewers don't deserve to have his pearls cast before them, is that there's the kind of a much more kind of subtle subplot going on. And I did get kind of a bit of a flavour of that in this series, actually. It was kind of subtle, but it felt like not anything that concrete, but just a kind of a flavour of that, really. So what did I make of it? Well, I thought it was brilliant. I thought one of the best things about it was the character Father Marcus, played by Ben, what's his name? I never remember the name of actors, who just did it brilliantly, just such a charismatic, could just watch him really play that role. Probably reading things out of a telephone directory. Was it The Exorcist? No, but it was a damn good series. I think, was it frightening? It didn't frighten me a lot, really. Not much does these days, I have to say, in terms of films. Life terrifies me. um, things like IT terrify me, and not not in a paranoid way, just in a kind of a I can't understand what I'm doing kind of way. Things like finances terrify me, but horror films tend not to frighten me very much these days. But there were a couple of points in the film where the possessed person, or the demon in the possessed person, just looked, it was just a glance that they gave to somebody. I think it was actually to the mother, that was really quite terrifying. Just something in that look. And I've actually seen that look in real life. I've seen somebody looked at me that way once, and then looked away in kind of like disgust. It was at a Download Rock Festival, and somebody was walking on. They looked like they were well out of it, they looked like they were really bombed out on drugs, but not just. And in that moment, it looked like somebody that was quite kind of, in quite a bad way. Their posture was really kind of quite strange, and they were walking around, and they just turned, looked at me, gave me this evil look, and then looked away as if to say, and it reminded me of that look. But I think with horror, some of the scenes with of exorcism in it were, there's too many people there for it to be scary. So there's some scenes with a whole bunch of nuns, and a whole bunch of family members doing the exorcism, and there's stuff flying around and cupboards opening and closing and that kind of all that kind of stuff. But there's kind of too many people, and it's too kind of brightly lit. So it didn't really, I think things to be frightening, you have to kind of almost recreate that sense of isolation. If you're experiencing something scary and there's a big crowd of you and it's kind of quite well lit, it's not going to be as scary as if you're on your own or with just a few people in a dark, claustrophobic location. And I think that's where some of the horror was kind of lost a little bit. I like the fact that it was quite realistic. When I say realistic, okay, what I would call supernatural realism. Okay, so when I talk about supernatural realism, I don't mean that I believe all these things are true. Also saying that I'm not saying that I don't believe that some of these things are true, but what I'm saying is that what I consider to be, when I use the term supernatural realism, is that these things reflect common beliefs about the supernatural, and this does. And there was some stuff that the only bit I didn't like was there were kind of millipedes or centipedes or something like that were all clustered around the girl's bed at one point, and I thought, are they, it's set in America, set in Chicago, isn't it? Are those things native to Chicago? Do you get the creatures like that? And maybe you do. But I kind of thought that was, a bit too obvious. When she was and she brought one up at one point as well, didn't she? Kind of coughed one up. And I thought, well, are these hallucinations brought on by the demon? If they're hallucinations brought on by the demon, that's kind of absolutely fine, because that fits within supernatural realism. But, could one of those creatures actually be down her throat? It was after she took the holy water, I think, wasn't it? So the things I liked about it, so in keeping with the supernatural realism, it was very, very much, as far as I'm aware, because I'm not a Roman Catholic priest, in keeping with the kind of the beliefs of Catholicism about possession. And I've done a whole video covering all this stuff, if you're interested in that kind of thing, kind of like documentary style video. Well, not documentary, but you're right, you know what I mean. Exploring different beliefs, demystifying. So he's talking about things like infestation and obsession and possession, and then they had another stage, which was what they call subjugation, which is where the possessed and the possessee kind of almost become one. Their wills unite. And I thought, ooh, that's interesting. I've not heard about that before, so I researched that, looked into it. And the closest thing I came to it, and I can't remember the source now, it was one of the Catholic YouTube channels was talking about this, and it was saying that there's another category for people who invite possession, and I'm not sure whether they use the word subjugation in there or something else, but there was basically the equivalent of that. So they followed Catholicism kind of quite closely. I thought the acting The acting varied, but there was some very very good acting. And because I never remember names, that's what a clue as to why it's Mark's ND or Early's ND late reviews. So the woman who was the woman that was kind of bankrolling all the kind of satanic kind of fifth column within the church, I thought she was brilliant. She had just a real presence about her, and you could just tell from the very start, really. She's kind of doing quite kind of normal things, you know. She's kind of, you know, she's acting kind of quite, you know, she's in quite a straight role, if you like. It's quite a straight character, but there's just something about her, and there's a real presence about her. So I love that character. So her and Father Marcus, I thought, were both brilliantly acted. I liked the character that I was a bit dubious about the acting of was what was his name? He was the guy that had kind of been sent from Rome to partly to as part of the prelude to the Pope coming, but also to kind of kick some ass, really. And the one that gets threatened with a gun by Father Marcus. He presented as very stiff, but I suspect that there was a reason for that. I like to think that that wasn't just kind of stiff acting. I like to think that was part of his character, that he was this very kind of formal character that represented the higher echelons of the church, and presented like that. But he also, there was much more to him than met the eye. So and him and Marcus were kind of adversaries, but also, you know, kind of also allies, and spoke the same language. So yeah, so that was interesting. So I'm not going to damn that actor. Interesting turn of phrase, isn't it? Because I suspect there's a reason why he presented in that particular way. I thought there was a touch of the Omen in this. You know, in this kind of conspiracy of, you know, people in high places. A little touch of Rosemary's Baby. It's interesting, isn't it, that in a lot of horror films, kind of Satanists are presented as often quite middle-aged, and at least middle-class people, or people that, you know, middle to upper class, which is kind of quite interesting. Whereas in reality, I think, you know, probably most Satanists are probably more dispossessed people. They're probably less likely to be kind of high flyers and people in high places. They're more likely to be people who are feeling disempowered and struggling in their lives, and therefore kind of drawn to things like that. But I guess, you know, that doesn't fit with all the kind of conspiracy kind of stuff. So it's a bit of kind of Illuminati, and all. I gotta be careful what I say here, because YouTube doesn't like phrases like that. That's not me being tinfoil hat, because I haven't got my hat anymore. But people that use, there's a phrase that ends in theories and begins in a word that I'll sort of break up the syllables. Con, next syllable; spear, next syllable; ras, next syllable; e. That if you have that in your YouTube video, they actually kind of downgrade you, and it's to do with, I think, things like anti-vaxxers and things like that, which they discourage, and yeah, some other stuff as well. So I never use those words out loud. I'll put them in the description box or anything like that. But it had that flavour, you know, of all that stuff, you know, all those kind of beliefs, you know, the kind of David Icke, and, you know, he says that, you know, the world is run by Satanists that are looking to seize control. I love the fact that the Pope's poster had "He is coming," and you couldn't see who it was, and you had this kind of red cloak with just the back of a head, you know, so it was like Satan is coming. I liked the way they had that ritual that everyone seemed to know about. The priests all seem to know about that. In my experience, priests and members of churches, generally speaking, know nothing about the occult. They think they do, but whenever I've heard priests or members of any kind of church, you know, Christian church, talk about the occult, they've talked out to bollocks. They kind of, you know, I think they must kind of get their information from Montague Summers or something like that. But I quite like the fact that they seem to know about that ritual. and that thing with the ashes and the different body parts and all that kind of thing. I thought that was kind of quite good. So I like the character development. I like the fact that they made Father Marcus gay, and he's kind of been defrocked, and he's just about to cop off with somebody in the bar with a little happy little twinkle in his eye. And the poor guy, I can't remember what happens next, but he gets kind of distracted back into something else, doesn't he? So I felt sorry for him. I thought it was really kind of nice that they made him gay. Yeah, great, and I like the way they kind of Catholicism plays a big part in this, and I do like Catholicism. I think it's interesting. Catholicism is, I'm surprised it's not more popular with young people, because there's a real, it's really quite. I'm using this word metaphorically, not literally, but it's very kind of sexy, and this kind of makes the whole Catholicism look very sexy as well. I'm surprised there's not this kind of big kind of shift in this youth movement for going into Catholicism, because there's something, it's very there's something very theatrical, there's something very engaging and appealing, and the ritual and the devotion and the sense of good and evil, and the battle between the two, which of course is played out in Protestantism as well, but it's not as pretty. It's not as photogenic in Protestantism. So something about the way Catholicism is, and also Catholicism is, it's got this. It's a great medium. I think it's a great great premise, really, to put works of fiction in. And also, you got a lot of controversy in Catholicism. It's got the dark side within Catholicism as well. So it's I wish more things were kind of. I mean, I think most things of this genre tend to be kind of couched in Catholicism if they're couched in any kind of church. There's another brilliant series called Apparitions, which kind of covered some of the same ground as this series, and I would heartily recommend that. As Martin Shaw in that. That's really, really good. Maybe we'll do a review of that at some point. So yeah, the church is very sexy in this. And I'm looking forward to watching the next part, but I'm holding off. I'm kind of saving it, like a kind of a vintage wine. So very much looking forward to the next bit. So I hope my hopes for the next one are that the acting remains good. That it's still very kind of character driven. I hope they kind of preserve the mood. I think the other thing, I think music could have been better in this. There were some moments where there's some quite good music, but I think and they kind of used a little bit of the tubular bells that kind of popped in here and there, but it was very inconsistent and sporadic. I think for me this could have been a whole lot better if they'd had a kind of a whole composed, got a good kind of spooky classical composer to put something together that a whole movement that had everything in it that they might need, but that was kind of that had differences and light and dark, but also had some kind of consistency to it. So it can kind of, if you like, tinted the whole series with the same shade, if you like, to mix some metaphors a little bit there. I think music's a big thing with this kind of thing. So, and that's why The Omen, I think it was it's not why The Omen is so good. It's one of the reasons why The Omen is so good. So I think better music would have been good. Yeah, I think so. So there's always something that I leave out and then kick myself and then put in the description box afterwards. But yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, I'm saving this. I'm watching the last series of Dexter at the moment, so I'll be doing a review of that when that's over. And then I've actually downloaded the e-copy, bought an e-copy of the novel that it's based on, Darkly Dreaming Dexter. So I'll be doing a book review on that. So just a couple of plugs, I guess. I've mentioned this already, but I've done a series on all the theories around demonic and spirit possession, and I've also done another kind of shorter, I can't remember if it's one video or two, which is interesting, which is a response to some Catholic, mainly Catholic, but not entirely Catholic, YouTube videos that for some reason link narcissism with demonic possession, which I kind of took exception to, really, with my kind of professional head on, and did a kind of response video to. So that's out there in the mix as well. So I've done some previous reviews of Dexter, because we've mentioned that. I will do something on... probably will do something on apparitions at some point, but do have a watch of that if you get the chance. And something that's on the tip of my tongue, which I was going to mention as well. Oh yeah, I did a book review on something which is a book about modern day Satanism, and written by this historian. So that might be of interest as well, because I was making that point about Satanists in film and TV, you know, being kind of wealthy, high flyer, debonair, kind of movers and shaker types, and the actual reality of and that's not me wanting to be rude to Satanists, because I haven't got anything against Satanists apart from and it's one of the things that I talk about in the other video, is there is a link between LaVeyan Satanism and some of the writings behind that, and far right politics, and that I do have a problem with, and that's one of the things we talk about in that video. But that's not universal by any means. So I think, you know, I wouldn't want to tar, you know, Satanists as Nazis or fascists, because I think the majority, you know, I think probably there are far more Satanists that aren't than are. But if you're interested in the kind of people that follow that, and some of the philosophies around it, and some of the key people in some of those movements, then have a watch of that book review and maybe have a read of the book. So a few things to follow up on, and yeah, so I will be back with a review of season 2. And we'll be doing some more reviews as well. So Dexter review probably coming fairly soon. Last series, again, I'm kind of wanting to watch it, but not wanting it to end. But I'm down to something like the last 3 episodes of that. So we'll be doing one on that, and then one on the novel when I read it. Yeah, I think it's bound to be something that I didn't include, but that's one of the other reasons why it's called ND Reviews. I hope you enjoyed my ramble, and I'd love to talk about this stuff. Do put stuff in the comments, but be polite. People that talk about films and books and music, you know, there's a higher incidence of people that are really rude when they engage in discussion on these things, and I have no tolerance for that whatsoever. So if you're not grown up enough to have a conversation where we can disagree and enjoy disagreeing, and share differing views, then, you know, don't even bother, my friend. Okay, so I'll be back soon with some more stuff. I've been working very hard lately on a long RJ program, because at the moment, at the time of recording this, we're in the early stages of a pandemic lockdown. So I've been putting a lot of videos out for that, so that people have something to work on with recovery for every day. So RJ is a condition, a mental health condition that I help people with. So I haven't done many other videos, so I'm kind of conscious I haven't kind of done the videos on some of the other topics, so I'm trying to kind of balance that out a little bit. So hopefully I'll have more time soon, and we'll be kind of covering some other stuff. So I like to keep it kind of balanced, 50-50, retroactive jealousy, and other stuff, so that there's something for everyone. That's what I like to do. So have a good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, and Rangi Marie.